I recently received this question on one of my videos, and I think that you may be able to relate to it as well. So I want to share it with you. It says, "Hello, so I can read in Spanish at a B1, B2 level, and when I listen, I'm able to distinguish most sounds and words. But even though I know the words and can make them out in speech, it's difficult to simultaneously understand them. Do you have any suggestions that can help? Do I just need to continue with listening until it clicks in my brain? I appreciate any input you may have." This is such a common occurrence, and this question is very well articulated because many Spanish learners struggle with this but don't exactly know what is happening. So it's very important that we go over this because being able to understand Spanish in real time is essential for ultimately developing the relationships with native speakers that most Spanish learners dream about. One of our students in our program, Elevate Spanish Accelerator, Brenda, had a similar desire.
I always loved Spanish in Mexico. I grew up in Southern California, so there is a lot of Mexican influence. And so I've always wanted to live there and be a part of a community. And you really have to know the language. If I don't understand Spanish, I can't understand the culture, the people. Spanish isn't just a language, it's a culture. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to come into Mexico as a gringa and live as a gringa in Mexico.
So let's talk about what helped her and what you can do to improve your simultaneous listening skills. But first of all, if you're new to me, te doy una gran bienvenida. Me llamo Erika. I'm a former Spanish medical interpreter turned Spanish teacher and language coach, now living and loving life abroad here in Mexico. I have Spanish learners who are preparing for relocation or deep communication with their family, community members, and colleagues, speak with confidence in the situations that matter most to them, and develop the relationships that they so desire. If that sounds like you, you are in the right place, but it all starts with a solid plan. So if you're looking for a comprehensive study plan that you can implement right away, that's going to have you improving your listening, speaking, reading, writing, grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary, all the things, then grab your free copy of my Spanish Fluency Blueprint. You can find that at the link below or by going to ericareallanguage.com/blueprint. So what's happening when you know the words, but you're still struggling with simultaneous listening comprehension? Well, you've likely developed strong recognition skills. So you know the words, especially when you read them or when you hear them spoken slowly and clearly. But your brain hasn't yet built up the automatic processing speed to keep up with real-time speech. The good news, that's completely normal and fixable. Yes, more listening and just giving it time will help tremendously without a doubt. But how you listen matters as well. So let's go over 5 targeted strategies to help bridge that gap between word recognition and true in-the-moment comprehension. Number 1, focus on the big picture. Not every word. When listening in real life, don't aim for 100% comprehension. Instead, focus on key words and context to get the main message. Our brains are actually excellent at filling in the blanks when we let go of the pressure of catching every detail. So some of what the person who is speaking to you is saying may be mumbled or just way too fast, but you may still be able to get the main message because sometimes it's the non-essential words that actually get missed. Imagine someone says, "Sí, fui a la tienda, compré algo de despensa y luego regresé a la casa para cocinar." You may have missed that part in the middle, compré algo de despensa, but you got the main message of the person went to the store and came back to cook. So letting go of perfection allows your brain to stay present and improves comprehension faster. Number 2 is kind of similar, but it's to practice chunking instead of word-by-word listening. For example, instead of having to hear me lo dio as 3 separate words to be able to understand them, get used to hearing things like me lo dio, which is honestly how we would probably usually say it in everyday speech. Me lo dio. It sounds like one word. Vamos a ver. Vamos a ver. One way for you to develop this skill of being able to hear things in chunks and therefore being able to process them faster is by practicing with shadowing. So when you shadow, you're listening to authentic Spanish dialogue. This could be a YouTube video with subtitles. It could be a podcast with a transcript, for example. You need the text and the audio. And then you're basically reading along with the speaker. almost simultaneously, sometimes a little bit behind the speaker. And you do your best to match their rhythm and speed and intonation. Even if some parts are faster than others, even if some parts are mumbled, you just listen and you go along trying to imitate that. It's a really powerful technique to improve flow and real-time comprehension. Tip number 3 is to use a mix of extensive and intensive listening. So with extensive listening, you're going to listen to longer content. Make sure even so that it's still at the comprehensible level for you, that you can pick out enough of what is being said to be able to follow along with the main idea. So what you use is going to completely depend on your level. It could be TV shows, audiobooks, movies, podcasts, YouTube videos. And basically you are exposing yourself to as much Spanish as possible. The goal here is not to catch every word. It's to relax, absorb patterns naturally, and build your ear endurance, just like jogging at a steady pace. And then we have intensive listening, which is where the sharpening happens. So you can take a short clip, like a 30 to 90 second clip that has a transcript, and you're going to listen once without reading the transcript. Just try to get the gist, then listen again while reading the transcript and extract any new vocabulary and expressions. Look those up, see what they mean. Expand your vocabulary in that way. And then listen again, once again without the transcript, and let those new items just marinate in the context, like I like to say. So this builds your vocabulary, which is never a bad thing. Even though the issue that we're discussing today is mainly related to knowing the words but not being able to process them immediately, sometimes what is actually happening is that there are new words in there. We're catching a whole lot of what the speaker is saying, but those new words that we're not familiar with are the ones that are keeping us from understanding the main message. So this is kind of opposite of what I said in number 1, because sometimes we can still get the gist of what the person is saying, even if we don't know some of the words. But sometimes it just happens to be that those words that are new for us are the key words. These are the ones that we need to know. So we have to constantly be expanding our vocabulary. Intensive listening not only builds our vocabulary, but also helps us decode things faster, especially when we do that first step of practicing decoding on our own without the pressure of being in a live conversation. Developing that daily, if possible, habit of listening and decoding without all of the pressure really does help to speed up that processing ability. Doing both types of listening, both extensive and intensive, like jogging steadily and then also adding in sprints along the way, builds both endurance and precision. And we want both. Number 4 is to read out loud often. You may have already started doing this in a previous step when we talked about shadowing. That's a way to read out loud as well. But this is so important to emphasize because reading silently and reading out loud activate different parts of the brain. Reading out loud helps you connect sounds, rhythm, and meaning all together. And these are the same skills that you need when listening. It also strengthens your auditory memory, so your brain starts recognizing full phrases together and not just individual words. In my next 90 days Spanish workshop, I introduce you to several students who dramatically improve their pronunciation and therefore their listening abilities by reading out loud regularly. You can find that by going to the link in the description or ericaraylanguage.com/90days. Brenda applied many of these tips with incredible results when it came to her listening comprehension.
Understanding the language, especially if John and I are communicating, I can understand what she's saying. And there again, writing is, when you write it, then you see your vowels and you have to say that every vowel needs to be said in the word and sentence. Also, I was very tense about it, always worried about it. And I don't know if you read into my background there. It was very difficult for me at first, and so now I'm becoming more relaxed.
Tip number 5 is to try transcription practice. This is a favorite of many intermediate learners. So you're going to play a short clip and then try to write down exactly what you hear, and then check it against the transcript. Obviously, you can pause it as many times as you need to. And I even encourage you to go back and listen again and check your writing before you go to that step of checking your work to see how you did. This forces your brain to listen closely and get better at distinguishing sounds that you may otherwise overlook. I actually spent quite a while in the past working as a transcriptionist, and sometimes we would get the most horrible audio. I did both English and Spanish transcription, but either way, sometimes the audio was just terrible. And the first time I would listen to it, I would say, okay, there's nothing here. Everything is inaudible. And I would listen again and again. I did not get paid enough to do this, by the way, but I would listen again and again. And incredibly, after a while, I was able to complete most of the transcript. Yes, there were some parts that were still inaudible, but most of it started to reveal itself. And it's just incredible how that repetition and really, really focusing and listening close can train your brain to be able to hear sounds that you would otherwise miss. Those are my 5 tips for today. And a bonus tip is to accept some lag, at least for now. You may understand the sentence 2 or 3 seconds after it's said, and that's totally normal. It is okay. Your brain is building pathways, and that delay will likely shorten in time. But even advanced speakers experience lag sometimes, myself included. For me, that happens in both languages. In summary, yes, a lot of this will click in time, but you can speed up the process by focusing on key words and the main message, training your brain to hear chunks instead of isolated words, combining extensive and intensive listening, reading out loud to connect sound and meaning, and trying transcription to sharpen your listening abilities. Again, if you need help designing your full A to Z plan that will help you target your own trouble spots, perhaps that's listening, perhaps that's speaking, perhaps it's some of both, then do grab a seat at my workshop, the Next 90 Days Spanish Workshop. Today, we focused in on simultaneous listening comprehension, but if you would like more tips on improving your overall Spanish listening comprehension, then I recommend this video next.
I think it's an excellent program. I would recommend it to anybody. They're really wanting to learn Spanish and they want to put the work in, then this is a great program.